in the wider Caribbean, those who are listening in the United States of America, in Canada, and of course across the pond in the United Kingdom. This is Mark Brantley bidding you another good night, hello, welcome to another edition of On the Mark. This is your show, the People's Show. This goes across the channel, as we like to say, straight talk across the Narrows. And this show has been happening now for quite some years, in fact, over a decade. We come every Wednesday from 8 to 10, 2 hours of prime radio, 2 hours of talk radio, 2 hours of commercial-free radio. We remain the only show of its kind in the Federation, offering our listeners an opportunity for uninterrupted talk and giving you the opportunity, therefore, to call in and articulate your views on any of a number of issues that are raised from time to time. Sometimes I raise an issue, other times, of course, you raise an issue. Either way, this is dialogue at its best, and this is our attempt to foster better dialogue in the country, dialogue without rancor, where we can have different opinions, and as I like to say, we can disagree, but of course, we try not to be disagreeable. So we're here, and I'm delighted to be back with you for another edition of On the Mark. If you're tuned in, it must mean that you're listening to the Eastern Caribbean's only powerhouse, VON Radio, the voice of Nevis. www.vonradio.com or 860 on your AM dial. We're also streaming live, I'm told, on YouTube and also on Facebook. So however you want to join us, please join us. For those of you who are not only listening but viewing as well via Facebook or YouTube, if I look a little disheveled and a little tired, it's because I am. I've only just returned from a short but lengthy trip, lengthy in the sense of the distance that I had to travel, short in the sense of the length of time that I was away. I would have left the Federation last Friday and would have returned just hours ago. I was asked by the Prime Minister to attend an event in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates dealing with certain matters touching and concerning the Citizenship by Investment program. As we all know, the Prime Minister himself has been integrally involved as chairman of CARICOM in the unfolding situation in Venezuela and the response thereto. And I led a delegation including the Honorable Attorney General Vincent Byron Jr. and Mr. Les Can, who's the CEO of the Citizenship by Investment Unit. And we had an interaction in Dubai, specifically in the United Arab Emirates, with agents and citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis and those developers and those who are involved in the Citizenship by Investment program. By all reports, the matter went exceedingly well, and I'm delighted that we feel that those who were in attendance were very satisfied with the event. We know that there's been a considerable level of chatter in the market square, in the public squares, I like to say, and therefore it was important for us to go and to have a conversation in a candid way, and we fielded questions, and I left feeling that things had gone extremely well. I've since seen a few media reports confirming that in the minds and eyes of those who were there, that things went well, and I feel, therefore, that the purpose for which we attended was well, in fact, intended and well executed, and that the people whom we intended to meet with and intended to see would have had some comfort from that visit. So I was very pleased to have done that, and of course, now I'm back, and tonight I decided if I'm back and it's Wednesday, then I must be here with you on the radio, tired as I am. So you would forgive me, and of course I'm hopeful that those of you who are out there who have something to say will indeed call in and have your say, so that you could be an integral part of the show tonight, and in some ways take the pressure off me, because when you don't call, obviously, I have to talk and I have to find things to talk about. I never come to the show prepared in the sense that I don't have a script, and I try to arm myself with the necessary information so that I could have a conversation. Sometimes even with the best of my efforts, those of you who are out there, you call in and you have different ideas and you have different things that you wish to talk about, and I do not always have the answer. In fact, a lot of times I don't have the answer. Sometimes I know that we're just talking through an issue, and sometimes in that dialogue we arrive at some answer, some consensus, some light. Oftentimes in our country, as I like to say, we generate a lot of heat but very little light, and so it's important that as we talk to each other, as we discuss, and even where we have divergent views, as we continue to discuss, we get sometimes to a middle ground that all can live with. And so I thank all of you who have been with the show for all these many years. I thank you for your continued participation. Now, just by way of at the start of the show, I want to start the show by extending my very deep condolences. While I was abroad, I learned of the passing of Teddy Blackman Liebert, whom we all know. Blackman was his nickname, Rastaman. I know he used to, everywhere I see him, we had a little joke because he used to make this beautiful drink from oats that I liked, and he used to go around and sell his drinks. He was involved very heavily in cricket. He was involved very heavily in culture, particularly the string band, and he was really somebody who was loved by all. I've never heard anybody say a bad word about Blackman. If he did any wrong, I don't know about it, because everybody I spoke to spoke highly of him. His family members, those whom he interacted with, and many, many would say of him that he was someone who contributed to everything and to everyone, someone who lived selflessly. And he had a terrible accident, and finally, after much fight on his part, a valiant effort, he succumbed to his injuries. He had been in Barbados in intensive care there. And so I would want to take the opportunity this evening to extend my deepest condolences to his family, all those whom he leaves to mourn. My good friend Hilarina Rowena Liebert, who's someone who over the years has spoken to me here on this show, and whom I saw last at Montpellier Hotel, and we spoke about a Blackman then. He was still alive, and we were still praying, all of us, for his safe recovery. God had a different plan, and so I want to extend my condolences to my dear friend Hilarina, and to all the siblings, all the family members that he leaves to mourn. I can't mention family without, of course, mentioning my very dear friend Rosa in St. Martin. It's really a sad situation. Someone who really has gone before his time, in a sense that he never got the opportunity to grow old, and someone who would have died because of a terrible accident that he had, a motor vehicle accident. So I want to extend my condolences to the entire family, and to let them know that just as we prayed as a country for them when Blackman was fighting, so we will continue to pray for them as they mourn, that they will be comforted. And so I truly, on behalf of us all here at Von Radio, I extend my condolences. I also learned whilst I was away of the passing of John Kelly. I don't even know what his correct name was. I know him as John Kelly. I hope that was his correct name. And John was somebody whom all of us knew very well. Many people used to say he was a disgusting fellow, but I will tell you, some of the best advice that I have had has come from John, when in his moments he would pull me aside, and he has brought many an insight to me over the years. John had a tough, I think, life towards the end in terms of just the difficulties of old age. He was in the hospital quite a bit, and so finally he has been called home. And I want to extend my condolences to his family members. I want to say to them how sorry we are that we have lost John, and that I know that all of Nevis is mourning with them in this very difficult time in which they find themselves. It is truly, truly a difficult period for all, and I too extend my condolences to them from all of us here at On The Mark. Lastly, I want to extend my condolences to the Walwyn and Tyson family. Bernard Walwyn, better known to many as Leap or Dun, succumbed to his own illness. He had, as many would know, been ailing for some time in the Virgin Islands, where he has lived for many, many years. And his relatives brought him back home to Nevis some weeks ago. Unfortunately, he succumbed to his illness. And my heart really goes out to the family, because just a few weeks ago, they buried another sibling, Lynette. And so they've had lost two real stalwarts of their family in the last several weeks, just weeks apart. And I really wanted to extend my condolences to them. They're people I know very well, people I grew up with, people I love dearly. And Sherry, Jilly, Jean, all of you, Bombo in the Virgin Islands, Tessa in the Virgin Islands, all of you who might be listening, I just want to extend Lornette, Jabal, everybody, the entire family, Pim Pim, my heartfelt condolences for the loss that you would have experienced. it is an extremely difficult thing. I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to see and to speak with Bernard at the hospital. When he spoke with me, he always had a very mischievous smile that he got from his mom. And Lynette had the same smile. He had that smile. The only other one I think had that smile is Sherry. But had a very mischievous smile, a sly little smile that he would give. And he gave me that smile. And when I saw that and I spoke to him, I said, the old Dune is all right. But again, God had a different plan. And I want them to know that our hearts are heavy, that we mourn with them, that we're praying for them. And that we're praying indeed for all of those who mourn, all of those who are suffering, all of those who may be at the hospital. If you're hearing me, we're praying for your safe recovery. And we ask that God will comfort all of you. And I like to say, as someone who has experienced my own small measure of loss, I would like to say to you that it may not sound so now. It may even sound hollow. But time does help. And that over time, we tend to feel a bit better. No one can really tell you or purport to say how it is you feel, because people grieve in their own ways, and for each person, grief is a personal matter. But what I will say is that time is a healer. And if you pray and if you rely on God's mercy and His infinite wisdom, if you ask for His grace to be upon you, and if you continue to allow time to heal, I think over time it gets a lot better. As I say, sometimes when you're in the thick of the storm, it doesn't appear to be so. But in my own experience, it is so. And God has always promised that He will not give us more than we can bear. And so my condolences to all of those who mourn, my prayers and best wishes for all of those, that they will feel better, that their emotions, which are now at their lowest ebb, that over time, joy once again will come to them. And certainly, we have lost John Kelly, who was in Brownhill. We have lost, of course, Bernard, who was also in Brownhill. And Barnsgate has lost a giant in Teddy Blackman Libed. And to all the families, I therefore extend my deepest condolences. Ladies and gentlemen, this is On The Mark. I'm your host, Mark Brantley. And in a short while, we'll open the phones. But before we do that, just a couple of issues. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock, I have my monthly press conference, the Premier's press conference. I feel particularly proud of this press conference. I know it might be for some a small thing, but it is something that we campaigned about and that we promised that going forward, at least once every month, the Premier will have a press conference in which he will report to the island what is happening, and most importantly, he will take questions from the media. I am inviting, of course, all the media houses on Nevis and St. Kitts to send their usual representation, and I look forward to having a good discussion with the media to answer questions and to clarify any issues that they might have at this press conference, which occurs tomorrow morning at the Social Security building at the Cabinet Conference Room. And that is where we propose to have this. That is where we've traditionally had it. And so I look forward, certainly, to you. And I look forward to giving an update to the general public as to where we are 1 month into the new year. We have not established a specific date each month for the press conference. And so if you find that the dates vary from month to month, it is largely because of the availability, scheduling. Sometimes it's a bit difficult. This trip, for example, that I just returned from to Dubai was unplanned in the sense that it was not part of my calendar. But of course, the Prime Minister asked me to do, and so I had to do. And I just wanted to say that we will give ample notice, but we are committed to doing this every month as we said we would. And I think thus far we have generally honored that commitment, and I'm truly grateful to the press and to all of those, the permanent secretaries of various ministries, that get me the necessary information each month that I can come and give a coherent report to the people of Nevis. I am certainly looking forward to that tomorrow, and again invite all the members of the press to come along, as they normally do, to the press conference at the Social Security building at the Cabinet Conference Room there at Pinnies. And we hope through that process that we again continue the whole approach of greater openness, greater accountability and greater transparency in government. I have said that if one thing and one thing only is said of me, once the politics is done with me, it is that I ushered into being a new era of openness and transparency, a new era when we can work together, a new era when we have, as I've dubbed it, one Nevis, During the campaign, we're going to campaign, and we're going to campaign hard. We're going to ask and try to appeal to your hearts and minds. We'll ask for your vote. And that time is going to come. It always comes. But once those votes are cast, it behooves all of us to work together to build our island and build our country. And that is what we will seek to do. In the context of building our island and building our country, I have seen recent reports in some quarters of the media suggesting that the UK government has issued some travel advisory on St. Kitts and Nevis. And just this evening I would have seen a response from the UK government indicating that it is not so, and that what it appears some have sought to spin as a specific advisory on the country of St. Kitts and Nevis, that is in fact inaccurate. And what it is that the UK Foreign Office routinely puts out generic advisories speaking to terrorism and crime and all of that to UK travelers traveling to a wide array of countries across the globe. There is no specific threat, there is no specific advisory in relation to St. Kitts and Nevis. This is a generic advisory, and in fact the language employed in that advisory speaks to St. Lucia, to St. Kitts and Nevis, to a number of countries. This is not, however, to say that we ought not to seek to do our very best to engage with the UK on these matters, because certainly we have never heard of any terrorism here or emanating from here. But they did explain that this was generic language that they opt to use. And so we just want to set that straight, set that record straight, because we understand sometimes that the elements in the opposition who seek to whip up hysteria in the country, to seek to give the country a bad name internationally, locally, regionally, and internationally, and who really, in my view, ought to desist. At the end of the day, the opposition is seeking, as the government and those in government also seek to do, to appeal to the hearts and minds of the voters and to ask the voters for an opportunity to govern. I don't know how you can ask for an opportunity to govern when you have mashed up and you have spent your entire time seeking to mash up, seeking to destroy what really is all that we have, our little country of St. Kitts and Nevis. Is everything perfect in St. Kitts and Nevis? Absolutely not. Do we have work to do? Absolutely yes. But I will tell you, having just traveled many, many hours and many, many miles to and from, there is nothing like touching down and having my feet once again in my own country. On my travels, I passed through London. And the pilot, when we landed at Heathrow, said that the temperature outside, he said, let me be the first to welcome you to Heathrow. The temperature outside is -2. And we have seen and heard of all of our friends and family in Chicago, in Ohio, all throughout the United States of America. They're talking about Arctic storms and temperatures, they say, in some cities which are below those in Antarctica. We have heard about temperatures in over 80% of America, they say, dropping below 0. In fact, in passing through Miami on my way home, it occurred to me that it might snow soon in Florida based on how chilly it was in Florida. Ladies and gentlemen, I say all that to say we are privileged to live in St. Kitts and Nevis. We are privileged to have a country that is warm, a country where the warmth of the weather is exceeded only by the warmth of the people. We are privileged, despite our difficulties, to have a country that we can call our own, a country that is respected. When I was in the UAE and I mingled and spoke to so many, one thing I came away with was the extent to which our country was respected. Now, it may not always seem so, because sometimes in the cut and thrust of the local politics we get at each other. But let us never lose sight of the fact that we have a special country, a country that is respected and well regarded internationally, a country which in its own right is a leader in our region. Despite our size and despite the challenges which come with small size, we are a leader in our region, and so may it continue to be. I'm very pleased that Serbia has now granted visa-free access to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, bringing our total under my watch as foreign minister to 19 new countries which have signaled their confidence in this government and their confidence in the stability of St. Kitts and Nevis to say that our citizenry can pass through their borders without let or hindrance. In the case of Serbia, for up to 90 days each year. So, if you want to travel to Serbia tomorrow, you want to travel to Montenegro, you want to travel to Kosovo, you want to go to all of Western Europe, you want to go to Brazil or to Russia, you can go. Rwanda, Sierra Leone, you can go. The Gambia, Zambia, you can go. Kenya, you can go. The idea is that we are bringing the world ever closer to St. Kitts and Nevis. And you must think and consider that a country this size, the smallest in the Americas, can have such a reach that it can say to large and significant countries in the world such as Russia and Brazil and others, let us sit at the table. You could have your foreign minister sitting down with the foreign minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, and sign an agreement which says that the people of St. Kitts and Nevis can pass without let or hindrance across the borders of Russia. I want the significance of that to set in. Because what it says to me is that despite our small size, we are punching well above our weight internationally. And for 19 countries in 3.5 years to say to us that your citizenry should be able to come without let or hindrance, I think that that is not only significant but remarkable. Of those 19, I should just clarify that 2, Ghana and India, have at this point only extended the visa-free travel to those with diplomatic and official passports. But we're working with them to say that it ought to be expanded to all passports. All of the other 17 have said that all who may wish to come can come. And that has moved our visa-free travel destinations up from around about 134 thereabouts where we met it to now 153, 154. And so we're moving very steadily in the direction that I committed to as your foreign minister, that our passport will be the most powerful in the entire region. And we're moving there. We have surpassed our neighbors, and we're moving now only Barbados, with which we are now equal, and the Bahamas, which I think has 2 or so countries more than us. Only those are in our league, so to speak, and we're moving in that direction. That to me is very significant, ladies and gentlemen. We have in that same period of time added diplomatic relations with 30, unprecedented time of expanding our diplomatic footprint, and we'll continue in that vein on both fronts. I think our people should be proud, because no country is going to grant to us that courtesy, that privilege, without having confidence that all is well in St. Kitts and Nevis and that we are a stable democracy. And I think that that is an important indication. As part and parcel of that leadership role, I am particularly proud of the role of the Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Timothy Harris, because he's turn now, and St. Kitts and Nevis' turn, to lead CARICOM. Many, during their tenure as leader of CARICOM, sitting in that chair, but have nothing of particular consequence, nothing particularly new. Well, not so for Timothy Harris, because he has come into the chair only in January and immediately has been met with the situation in Venezuela. And that situation, ladies and gentlemen, is an extremely dangerous situation. It is a situation where major powers are asking countries globally to throw their weight one way or the other. It's a situation where the great United States and Canada and members of the European Union, including our dear friends in the United Kingdom, have sought to say that the Maduro administration is illegitimate, invalid, and that they would not recognize the presidency of Nicolas Maduro. Some in Latin America and South America have done likewise. Brazil, Argentina, Chile are but a few examples. Then you have other countries who have said that they will not interfere, and that it is a matter for the Venezuelan people to determine who leads them, and that they do not think it appropriate not to recognize Nicolas Maduro as the president of Venezuela. On the one hand, therefore, you have the great powers, the United States, Canada, the EU, United Kingdom, and many in Latin America. On the other, recognizing Maduro or advocating for a different approach, you have great powers of Russia, China, and of course, you have Mexico, which has also adopted a different position. The world, ladies and gentlemen, has become polarized over this issue. Nicolas Maduro has been sworn in as the president, and one other, Mr. Juan Guaido, has declared himself president. And you have these two people. In fact, Mr. Guaido has been recognized by the United States, Canada, and others as the legitimate president, whilst, of course, Maduro has been sworn in and is recognized by others as the legitimate president. We have heard some statements emanating from the United States, emanating from the OAS and others, which have all but called upon the military to intervene. I have heard the pundits and the talking heads all say that it is a matter now for the military. When one listens to that level of rhetoric which talks about the military, and that it is now for the military to decide who will lead Venezuela, it takes us back to a time that we would not wish to remember. So all of us should recall that in this hemisphere, the military has been used and abused to engender regime change and to put in seats of power those not of the choosing of the people of the region, but those who have been chosen by those external to our region. We should not forget the history of Chile, the history of Panama, the history of Nicaragua, the history of Costa Rica and Guatemala, of Haiti, the history even of Jamaica. We should not forget the interventionist policies of other countries who have sought to dictate from on high who should sit in seats of power in these countries. And no sooner do they install one and that one does not suit their purpose, they take out and reinstall. And the military was often used as a tool for this. And I am concerned because I've listened particularly to our friends in the United States in the highest office in that land make comments such as, all options are on the table. We will not rule out even a military intervention. It begs the question as to whether we of the Americas in the 21st century will see, once again, foreign boots on local soil. This for us, ladies and gentlemen, goes far beyond Venezuela, goes far beyond the personality of Maduro. Persons who are deemed to be against democracy will arise from time to time. Indeed, they may well arise even in those countries which tout themselves as the bastion of democracy. It begs the question, however, how do we deal with that? Because if tomorrow Canada or the United States of America or the United Kingdom or Italy or France or any other country in the world were to determine that they no longer like Gaston Brown of Antigua or Timothy Harris of St. Kitts Nevis or Andrew Holness of Jamaica or Alan Shaston of St. Lucia or my friend Keith Mitchell of Grenada, do they have the right, therefore, to declare that they recognize someone else as Prime Minister? Does that right exist? Now, many have talked about the hardship in Venezuela, and yes, there's hardship and considerable suffering. Is that hardship caused by Nicolas Maduro and his policies? I have no doubt, because he has been the president, and if good comes, he must accept credit, and if bad comes, he must accept the blame. But let us not forget that the very countries that say that Venezuela is in hardship and that there's a humanitarian crisis are the very countries that have denied the government of Venezuela the opportunity to trade, to sell its oil and get the benefit of its money for the development of its people. Now you tell me any country in the region or in the world which has all of its supply of money cut off. It sells its goods on the world market, it cannot collect the pay. I was astounded as I traveled to read that Venezuela has some $1.3 billion worth of gold bullion with the Bank of England. You know what they've done? They refused the Maduro government access to what belongs to Venezuela. So when you tell me thereafter, the hospital in Venezuela doesn't have medicine, there's no food on the shelves, and people are therefore fleeing to Colombia and elsewhere, and all of this is due to Nicolas Maduro, I say, yes, Nicolas Maduro must be blamed. He is the president. Or at least he has been the president since all of this erupted. But equally, we cannot ignore the impact of the economic blockade that has effectively been placed on Venezuela. Look at Cuba. And look at what has been done to retard the development of Cuba over these past decades. And understand that if countries cut off your ability to trade, your ability to earn, your ability to bring money into the country, then what is the result? The result has to be hardship. It has to be dislocation. And this humanitarian crisis that we hear about, real as it is, and I'm not seeking to downplay the nature and extent of the crisis, real as it is, we must examine the root causes of that crisis and not create for ourselves a self-perpetuating myth where we say there's a humanitarian crisis and therefore Maduro must go and somebody else must come of our own choosing, whilst ignoring the fact that the humanitarian crisis that we seek to rely on was in part caused by us and the efforts we have made to undermine and destabilize the country of Venezuela. That is the reality. It's a chicken and egg conundrum, to be sure, but the one impacts the other. And it cannot be fair to say you have chickens but they have nothing to do with the eggs, or you have eggs and they have nothing to do with the chicken. Both are natural concomitants of the other, one flowing from the next. Which comes first as a matter for you. But the two are inextricably linked. So that is the first thing. The second thing is, of course, the precedent that it sets. That foreign countries can individually or collectively determine who governs a particular country. And I had this conversation recently, not to suggest any discourtesy or disrespect. As a chief diplomat for St. Kitts and Nevis, I have had to learn diplomacy. But I had this conversation. I got a call and it was said that we ought to line up behind the American position and not recognize Maduro and recognize the other gentleman, Juan Guaido. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And I listened to the arguments because these have been arguments that really we have been hearing now for some time. And I asked the question, do you believe in democracy? And the answer was absolutely. America remains a bastion of democracy in our region and in our world. I said, well, there's a concept of democracy which says one man, one vote. Yes. There's a concept of democracy which says that if the person receives the majority of votes should govern. Yes. And I then say, do you think it would have been right, since Hillary Clinton received nearly 4 million votes more than President Trump, that all of us in the region and the world should have said that based on the underlying tenets of democracy, we should recognize Hillary Clinton as the winner of the presidential elections in the United States and not Donald Trump, who got less votes than Hillary Clinton? Would we as Little St. Kitts and Nevis, as Jamaica, as Trinidad and Tobago, as Russia and China, and France and Spain and Rwanda and Mozambique, would we have been entitled to say that on the principle that each vote must count, on the principle that it is he or she who gets the majority of votes, that there was a clear winner in the United States by several million votes, and that was Hillary Clinton, and therefore we recognize Hillary Clinton as the President of the United States? Could we have said such a thing? I think it would have been considered political heresy. It would have been considered blasphemy, almost, for anyone to presume to say to the great United States of America that we outside your borders will determine who will sit in the White House. The United States of America determined under its own law that President Trump will sit in the White House. Notwithstanding, he got millions of votes less than Hillary Clinton. And there was no murmur internationally. You know why? We respect the right of the United States to make that determination for itself. That is what sovereignty should mean. And each country has that right. And so whilst we may look and think it's a strange system, that a system where somebody gets fewer votes and yet is declared the winner, how is that consistent with democracy? Nevertheless, we respect the right because that is how the founders of the United States have arranged their laws and their affairs. Were there allegations in the United States about voter irregularities and fraud? Absolutely. In fact, President Trump himself declared for all the world to hear that so many people voted illegally. So should we, the rest of the world, have said, well, there are allegations of irregularities and fraud in your electoral process, and therefore we will determine that Marco Rubio is your president, or Chris Christie is your president, or somebody who nobody has ever heard of should be your president? Who gives us that right? And my response is nobody gives us that right. That right must reside with the people of the United States. Because once you create the precedent that external forces and countries, because of their might, can determine who sits in seats of power in these countries, which are smaller, I think it sets a very dangerous precedent. Currently in the great United Kingdom, the bastion of democracy, we see Theresa May being buffeted, gale force winds, tossed to and fro, trying to deal with this Brexit issue. Should we conclude that Theresa May is no longer the person fit to govern and rule as Prime Minister in the United Kingdom, and therefore we, from last year, declare Jeremy Corbyn as the new Prime Minister of the UK? We say Jeremy Corbyn will bring order to this Brexiteer situation. Do we have that right? Of course, the answer is no. You must allow the British to work out their problems. You must allow Nigeria and Rwanda and Ethiopia and Taiwan and China. You must allow them because that is the privilege of sovereignty. Now the world understands that where there are issues internally, human rights abuses and the like, that the world has a duty, but it exercises that duty not through unilateralism, it exercises a duty through the United Nations. That is why it's there. And I've said all that I've said to bring it full circle. That I want to commend our Prime Minister, Timothy Harris, because he finds himself at this a critical point in our history. That as chairman of CARICOM, he has had a hot potato handed to him, an issue of gargantuan proportions. And that issue is the issue of Venezuela, where if we set the wrong precedent, we can have echoes of Venezuela throughout this century. The Caribbean and the Americas have gone past changing governments at the point of a gun. We have said that we have developed institutions, the OAS, the United Nations, which are designed to assist in conflict resolution. I make no case this evening for Nicolas Maduro. None. But I equally make no case for one Juan Guaido. None. I make a case this evening for the people of Venezuela to have the opportunity, just as the people of St. Christopher and Nevis, just as the people of Antigua and Barbuda, just as the people of the great United States of America and the great Canada must have the right to determine who sits in the halls of power in their countries. Democracy is a messy business. It is not always apple pie and a glass of milk, or in our context, a glass of lemonade or ginger beer. It can be messy business. It can be difficult at times. But the answer is not to overthrow the very principles of democracy that you say you uphold and adhere to. You can't call for a coup in the name of democracy. That can't make sense. That's an oxymoron. You cannot ask for a coup in the name of democracy. You cannot ask for the military of Venezuela to solve the problem, because any military solving a problem in a democracy means that we do not have a democracy. So the solution to the problem of Venezuela cannot lie in armed conflict. It has to lie in dialogue. It has to lie in diplomacy. And I was exceedingly proud to see our Prime Minister leading a delegation of regional Prime Ministers. Mia Mottley of Barbados, Keith Rowley of Trinidad and Tobago, to the United Nations and meeting there with the UN Secretary General Guterres. And that CARICOM, under the leadership of Timothy Sylvester Harris, has gone to New York and done what others have failed to do. You know what that is? Talk. Dialogue. I was very impressed to see they met with reps from Russia, from Canada. They met with the various protagonists. And I have said and continue to say that CARICOM is in a unique position as an honest broker to broker a peace and a deal in Venezuela to allow peace to be restored to that beautiful country. Peace is not going to be restored at the point of a bayonet. It's not going to be restored with foreign military boots on local soil. It will not be restored by saber rattling in Washington, D.C., and number 10 Downing Street. It cannot be dictated to from the Champs-Élysées or from Kingston, Jamaica. Democracy, lasting democracy, will only come if the parties are prepared to sit and to talk and to allow diplomacy to play a role. And that is why I'm so proud of our Prime Minister and CARICOM, because they have done what ought to have been done from the start. Seek, if you are to intervene not with threats, but with conversation. To say to Mr. Maduro, you have genuine problems in your country. You have a large segment of your population which is feeling oppressed. You have a genuine difference of opinion in your country. Can we talk? Mr. Guaido, you represent the National Assembly, elected. Can we talk? And bring the parties together. Where there's a willingness, ladies and gentlemen, to talk, where there's a willingness to engage in meaningful dialogue, solutions can be found. Many of us never thought we would see a day where the North Korean president would sit at the table with the United States president and talk. Many of us never thought we would see a day when the then leader of the Soviet Union would sit with the leader of the United States and as a result led to the collapse, as we know it, of communism. There is power in dialogue. There is power in peace. There's power in mutual respect. There's power in understanding that countries have their sovereignty, and that sovereignty cannot be just a fig leaf to be discarded when it is convenient, but that it must mean something. And there is absolute power in the truism that we cannot instill democracy in any country by the use of a force. We cannot call for a coup to restore democracy. It sets a dangerous precedent and reminds us of a history that is far, far too raw still, and a history which we ought to pledge collectively not to repeat. And so, I believe that Prime Minister Harris and CARICOM have ushered into being what ought to have been a call for cooler heads to prevail, a call for those who are rattling sabers to put the sabers away, and a call for dialogue on all sides. And I think in this regard, CARICOM is uniquely placed to play a leadership role. And Little St. Kitts and Nevis is at the epicenter of what is happening. May God grant them wisdom, and may He grant all parties a desire to find a common ground, because the alternative in Venezuela is armed conflict, and that is not an alternative that any of us would wish to see. A lot of people, when I was a little boy, they used to say in Brown Hill, the man them who saying hoots and putting you to fight against each other. When you don't fight and get your face mashed up and your lip bust and your head bust, they go on home, Not a thing wrong with them, you know why? They only say hoots. They weren't actually in the fight. They didn't take any of the blows that you got. So we need to consider those who are instigating war, who are seeking to say, in our local parlance, hoots. They are not the ones at the end of the day going to get a bloodied nose. The very poor people of Venezuela that we say we are concerned about, and who are themselves, we say, embroiled in a humanitarian crisis, are the ones who are going to be affected. And so my simple appeal is for all sides to take the lead of CARICOM. They say a child shall lead them. In this case, the smallest country in the hemisphere is providing the leadership through CARICOM, St. Kitts and Nevis. Ladies and gentlemen, it is 10 minutes to the hour of 9 o'clock. I'm going to open up phones, and since I have, despite my long journey, taken such a long time to speak, I will allow you now to take me to the end of the show. So I hope not to say much except yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir. It is 10 minutes to 9. Let me open the phones. 869-469-1616, 869-469-1700, and take your calls. Good evening, you're on the mark. Hello.
Blessed evening, my beloved brother. How are you and your family?
We are well, thank you. I hope you and your family are well also.
Yes, beloved. Yes, beloved. No, beloved, I've been listening to you from the time you start. And, I agree with you in most part. But, brother, let me call it as it is, beloved brother. This is the display of nothing but white supremacy. Let's call it what it is. That's plain and simple. But let me just sing a little chronology. But remember when they went into Africa, when the Catholic Church sent them under Pope Nicholas, when they said let's go and civilize the quote-unquote savages, brother. But then we come down to Haiti, the first African country in terms of its population, get independence in the hemisphere, beloved brother. In the early 1800s, we see what happened to Haiti, brother, and we see what happened throughout South and Central America. Into modern times, Salvador Allende, duly elected because he was a communist or socialist, beloved brother. And will we come closer now, we see the demise of the great Hugo Chavez. But look what happened in Grenada. But it is pure white supremacy. Any time, you know, African people or any other people got a different twist to them, and for the upliftment of their people, here come Caucasian people. But most of them, I'm not saying all of them, but the vast majority, especially those who have interest, corporate, you know, interests all over the world. They want other people resources. And if you don't let them have it, but then it's all about oil also. Because you know the dispute will be developed with Guyana and Venezuela since in colonial times. And you know that they find oil and different things. And that part, Venezuela is claiming it. But you know they don't want to see anyone there who is for their people, beloved brother. That's it. And I show you, you're a very intelligent man. You know about the Monroe Doctrine, right? Anybody could go and Google the Monroe Doctrine. I mean, I have time. Every guy know that people want to speak. Go and Google the Monroe Doctrine. They tell you plain and simple. United States have the right to defend its backyard. Come on. They're not the backyard of the United States, now England, and no other people. We are sovereign people, man. Leave people alone. They don't interfere. You leave them alone. Everybody have a right to decide what their destiny, whether they want to be socialist, communist, capitalist, Islamic Republic, as long as they are not murdering their people, beloved brother. No genocide is going on in that country. But I don't see nobody supposed to go inside that country. And if there's any genocide, say, going on in the Caribbean, there's CARICOM. If it's a CARICOM country, we got the forces there without any outside intervention. If anything going on the African continent, genocide. But Africans supposed to take care of that. The same thing in other places, beloved brother. These people need to leave people alone, man. Come on. But, and I hope CARICOM stay together, decide one chart, one part, and I don't want to see, it's just the EOCS together, and then, look, Jamaica gone one way, Trinidad gone. I'm not saying that is the case, but I'm just saying I don't want to see that, but I want to see a united front. Mm-hmm. And I call upon our brothers and sisters on the African continent too, because we got a lot. I don't know the exact percentage of African people in Venezuela, but a lot of African people there, and a lot of people of mixed race who are Africans too, beloved brother. That country is not a Caucasian country. It's a mixture. Black African and a mixture of Africans on election, beloved brother. He did not.
All right.
But,
okay.
What you said?
All right. Thanks for your contribution, my brother. We'll take some more calls
brother,
as well.
I'll continue to listen, beloved brother. But we must take care and just stand by Venezuela, man. Venezuela being great to us, help us, and like my grandmother, my maternal grandmother used to say, you know who your friends are when you're in trouble. But I'll continue to listen.
Okay.
Pan-Africanism our perish.
Okay.
One love.
Let's go back to the phones and take some more calls. Good evening. You're on the mark.
Good evening, Premier.
Good evening to you.
I want to make one or two announcements.
Mm-hmm.
The conference room at Disaster Preparedness will be used next Monday from 10 o'clock for an hour and a half for blind and visually impaired persons to go to, because the Eastern Caribbean Currency, the bank, they will be coming to give us some demonstrations with the new note.
Yes.
I'm very appreciative of it.
Yes.
I've said that before, and I believe that persons who are blind and visually impaired have really gotten somewhere, because they give more independence and you can help yourself. So I have already gotten in touch with some persons, and now it is on the radio. I hope more persons will come on out, because even persons who have the coins, some of them don't know the dollar. They don't understand how to know a dollar, how to know a dime, how to know a quart. And so I don't make up my mind to teach some persons there with that.
Okay.
Persons in the public who have given us their 1 cent, $20, whatever dollars at Evelyn's drugstore and Rams Wholesale. We appreciate it very much. We collected this month about $500 and something, and that will go towards our children for their scholarship. Now, we the Nevis Blind, Light and Visually Impaired Society, will be having our concert on the last Sunday in next month. The cost is still $10. It is at the Wesleyan Holiness Church in Gingerland. You can come down from Market Shop, depends on where you're coming from, just below the Anglican Church, the next church. So please continue to support us, and all the best. Thank you very much, Premier.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
And once again, congrats on the excellent work that you have been doing and continue to do.
Oh, well, the other members as well, you know?
Yes, but we hear your voice most, and so I'm grateful that you bring these issues to the fore so often.
Yes.
And continue to be an activist, because I think it's important that your organization has a voice, and you have called time and time again. So I won't send you a bill for the advertisements that you use my show for.
No, you won't do that.
All right. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
God bless you. All right, let's go back to the phones. Good evening. You're on the mark.
Good night, Honorable Mark.
Good night to you.
How your night is going?
I'm well, thank you.
Well, welcome back home to the shores of Nevis.
Thank you very
and
much.
I hope that you had a nice time out there in the ends of the Dubai trip. You see? But
Thank you.
basically, we'd like to send the condolences you're sending out to the families of the lost or the loved one in Nevis, and we hope that the strength of the Almighty and the ancestors guide them wisely, that they could keep on the goodness of what the person have left off, you know? And enough love to the people of Nevis and the people who dialogue with you, and to the people who listen to you every time when you come on the mouth. Now, this is one of the things we like to pursue with you, Mr. Premier. We left a message with you at time about the convention when it comes to human rights. And we like to know if you have done any homework presiding on that convention, because we know there is 9 articles of the convention that think it has signed on, but they ratify all 9, only 3 they ratify. So we were looking that the government and your part of the Nevis Oil can look at these grounds and make sure there is good conversation to see what is better to ratify the West 6, please.
All right. Okay, my brother.
You have a safe
All
night.
right. Thank you very much. Let's go back to the phones and continue to take the calls. Good evening. You're on the mark.
Good evening, my Premier.
Good evening to
Good
you.
evening, my Sheriff.
Thank you for
Hebrews
calling.
13, verse 16, 17, and 18. But to do good and to communicate, forget not. For with such sacrifices God is well pleased. Obey them that have the rule over you, and submit yourselves, for they watch for your soul, as they that must give an account, that they may do it with joy, and not with grief, for that is unprofitable for you. Pray for us, for we trust we have a good conscience in all things, willing to live honestly. Sympathy is going out to Paulette Pemberton and family over there in Newcastle on the passing of their mother, Alberta Pemberton. Sympathy is going out to the Mills family over there in Barnaby on the passing of Sheila Hicks at Camps Village. Sympathy is going out to the Libert family in Basgot on the passing of Teddy Blackman Libert. Sympathy is going out to the Walwyn and Tyson family over there in Brownhill on the passing of Bernard Walwyn. Do you know Bernard was a custom officer? Sympathy is going out to the family of John Kelly at Zion Village on the passing of their family. Sympathy is going out to Jeff and Janice family on the passing of their mother at Rollins Village, Monica Prentice. Good night to my cousin and nephew over there in cold, cold Canada. May God continue to bless you, Mark. Good night.
Thank you very much. And I always depend on you because those who would have passed on the island who I may not have heard of in terms of didn't come to my attention, you certainly would bring it. And so I would join with you in extending sympathies to the other families that I would not have mentioned earlier who mourn at this particular time as well. It is always a sad time for families, but more so for the island of Nevis when we lose our loved ones. And so we continue to pray for them. We continue to keep them in our prayers, and I ask that the prayers of the multitude would comfort them in their hour of bereavement. Let's go back to the phones and take some calls. Good evening, you're on the mark.
Good evening, Mr. Brown.
Good evening to you.
Yes. I admire your resilience. I mean, you have apparently become immune to jet lag.
Well, not really, but depending on you to help me tonight. So go ahead.
Okay. May I ask what route you took? Was it via London?
Yes.
So the Prime Minister opted to send you to Dubai instead of going himself?
Well,
Okay.
he had, in fairness to the Prime Minister, as I said, he was in the United Nations trying to deal as chair of CARICOM with the issues impacting Venezuela, which I'm sure even you would agree are very significant issues.
The trip wasn't planned weeks in advance?
Which trip wasn't planned weeks in advance?
Trip to Dubai.
The planning of it was mentioned but not planned. The planning of it came together very late because we had a number of other issues that we were looking at. But at the end of the day, we decided to divide the labor. And since we can't be in every place at the same time, certainly what he had to attend to was very significant as well.
Absolutely. I guess you know Mr. Fix-It. I'm going to soon call you Kissinger.
Well, I don't know about that. I would believe that you would agree that the situation in Venezuela is one that needs fixing as well.
Absolutely.
It's a serious, very serious issue. It's serious implications for the rest of the region and the world. And so the fact that the Prime Minister and St. Kitts and Nevis happens to be the chair of CARICOM and therefore is at the forefront of this at the moment, I think they deserve every commendation and encouragement from us, the people of the country.
Yes, I have mixed feelings about that. But it's good to know that you made progress on the CBI front. So the CBI has been our bread and butter for the past 10 years. Thanks to it, thanks to the re-engineering that the last administration did, it's now the cash cow that it is. Okay? Credit to them. You have to deal too with a press conference tomorrow. You know, I enjoy your press conferences, to be quite honest, right? The buck obviously stops with you. And I would suggest you give our Prime Minister some pointers on how to conduct a press conference. I mean, he has the habit of turning them into campaign events and soliloquies longer than yours for answers, right? And he has another bad habit of hiding behind the coattails and cocktails of his cabinet ministers, and worse, his senior civil servants when the difficult questions come. You know, he's not like you, who is up with important details of the ministry as it should be. Actually, I was particularly amused at the last one when he called up the poor financial secretary to substantiate his non-answer regarding the refusal to release the IMF report. I mean, what does he expect the financial secretary to do? Contradict him? Contradict the minister? You know, I don't know why so many politicians like to put civil servants in the embarrassing and compromising position. But by the way, did you see that IMF country report? Are you privy to it?
Yes, the entire cabinet has been privy to
the cabinet has. Okay. Did you see something in there that the public shouldn't see?
Well, I think the Prime Minister has spoken to that matter, and I believe the position that the Prime Minister has articulated was the position of the cabinet. Every country has a right, once an IMF Article 4 inquiry has been completed, to discuss the language that is employed in the report. And if there are parts of that report which are felt to be inaccurate, that every country has a right to have that discussion. People talk about the IMF report as if it is somehow novel that the report is not issued publicly. I don't believe that in Antigua and Barbuda we've seen a report now for some time, in large measure.
In St. Kitts,
Well, yes, in St. Kitts, but I'm just making the point that every country has that. Every country has that right to engage with the IMF, to seek to get clarification on any issues that the country feels ought to be clarified. So whilst we can have a debate about whether the report should be released or not released, and I appreciate that debate, I think that the public should also understand that every country has that right, because sometimes that gets lost in the discussion.
Yes, but in the interest of transparency and accountability and freedom of information, those are buzzwords we use all the time. That's why I asked if there's some national security thing that, the public should not have seen. If you have problems with, if you disagree with particular parts of the report, say so. Release it with the proviso that you don't agree with this, or it's a matter of contention, right? Hello?
Yes, I'm listening to you.
A matter of contention, but release it. It gives the impression that you're hiding something from the public.
Well, whilst I understand that, and it's a view that one can take, I'm not surprised that you would take that view in light of your political bent. But
political what?
Your political persuasion, your political bent. But having said that, I think that you also have to recognize that a government, and any government of the day, has within its wide remit the authority to take those kinds of decisions when it determines that something might be inimical to the interests of the country, or doesn't have sufficient clarity. Remember, things like the IMF report become a matter of record, which investors and others will look to.
Absolutely.
If they had to make a determination. So that is why countries have a right to seek clarification and to say to the IMF or to any other international organization that we don't agree with certain language or characterizations, and therefore would want them revisited. Okay. And that is a process that the Article 4 provides for. The Article 4 review actually has in it the provisions for that type of review. So that is what, so far as I'm advised, is currently happening.
Oh, well, the thing is that the IMF is a reputable professional international body. So, as you said, investors and so on look at what they say.
Sure.
Okay. All right. I'm not convinced that that's a good reason to keep it from the public, though. But regarding Venezuela, it was a pleasure hearing what you just said just now. I couldn't help but wonder, though, if you dare to repeat some of the things that you just said when you meet with your colleagues on the other side of the table in the State Department. And if you do say...
Well, yeah, what I just said, you think it was said in private? I thought I was on radio going out to the world. You think you're the only person sitting down and listening to this show right now?
Well, it's one thing. One thing to say it on the radio.
Uh-huh.
It's another thing to be right across from the Secretary of State or his counterpart, and watching them in the eyes.
But caller, what gives you the impression that these things have not been said?
No.
The point I'm trying to say to you, you're saying it would be good to say it. These things have been said, perhaps sometimes in different language, but these things have been said consistently. St. Kitts and Nevis has been a very consistent voice on this issue of Venezuela. And our voice has consistently said that dialogue has to be preferred to confrontation. And so what Prime Minister Harris is now doing as leader of CARICOM at this particular point in the region's history is really a continuation of a consistent position that St. Kitts and Nevis has had. We have steered this path. I sat in Canada on Parliament Hill with a special envoy from Christiana Friedland, the Foreign Minister of Canada, and we had this conversation.
Okay.
My reference moments ago to my asking the question, could St. Kitts and Nevis have been bold enough to declare Hillary Clinton President of the United States in light of the fact that she got more votes? That was a conversation had with the State Department. So these are conversations that we continue to have. I don't want the people of St. Kitts and Nevis to feel that there's any timidity on our part in advancing our views, because we feel that on these matters we stand on principle.
Okay. Well, that's good because, you know, if you do say that to them, I just wondered too if they would bluntly tell you, like Nikki Haley said at the UN, either you're for us or against us, and if you're against us, there will be consequences. You know.
Well, these conversations do occur, caller. You know, one takes them for what they are. Some people use language of a particular kind, others use language of a different kind. I prefer to use the language which I've come to learn quickly, and that is the language of diplomacy. I think when one uses that type of language, and I must hasten to say that it is not consistent because we deal with a lot of people in the United States government who do not speak like that. So some do say things like they're taking notes and they're naming names and this kind of thing, but that is not consistent and that is not widespread. We have diplomats there who engage in a diplomatic way, but we understand that the U.S. position is what it is, and equally we are entitled to have our position. It is what it is. But what I like about the dialogue, even with the United States, is that one can have a principled position. And the St. Kitts and Nevis, I know we don't get a lot of credit. I know that the critics are always quick to attack. But St. Kitts and Nevis has had a fairly coherent and consistent foreign policy over the last few years that I think the world and the region has come to respect. It may not be the foreign policy that some would like to see, that we are railing in the United Nations and we're doing, but it has been steady. It has sought to look out for the interests of St. Kitts and Nevis. It has sought to widen and deepen the footprint diplomatically of St. Kitts and Nevis. And I think the numbers suggest that we are making progress in that regard.
Well, you see, the thing is, though, you may feel that you may be able to convince them otherwise. But in all honesty, do you really think they care what Prime Minister Harris or Motley or...
Yeah, but caller, let us remember. When I believe it was Prime Minister Michael Manley stood on the floor of the United Nations and spoke to the issue of apartheid in South Africa. I hope that the historians out there will not judge me too harshly if I'm wrong, but that is my recollection, that it was he who stood and spoke eloquently on that matter. The rest of the world may well have said, a small little two-pittance country, Jamaica, coming you and making noise about South Africa. But what these things do, they galvanize attention, they galvanize action, and sometimes the Bible told us a child will lead them. So it is not sometimes always that Prime Minister Harris is going to change the mind of the United States, for example. But if you lend voice, give voice to a principled position which respects rather than destroys the very democracy that you say you're seeking to defend, it provides a rallying call, a catalyst for other countries to come to that consensus and that position. And I feel that in that regard, Prime Minister Harris and CARICOM are leading from the front.
Okay, no, it isn't that I don't have a problem with speaking, but you know, in my heart I know that it's going to be like Don Quixote fighting against the windmills with a spear, right? I've heard you say that we have a foreign policy essentially based on the principle of friends of all and enemies of none.
Yes.
Unfortunately, geopolitics does not allow us that luxury. I mean, we are in a U.S.-dominated space, and the U.S. does not hesitate to remind us of that. I mean, they no longer use gunboat diplomacy, although with this Venezuela crisis, they seem to be edging backwards to that. You know, they stop their outright, pretty much the outright invasions of countries like how they did Grenada and Panama and so on. They are now more subtle with tools like FinCEN's advisories and travel advisories and visa restrictions and those things. Okay? I mean, one of the unanswered questions of last general election is what delayed the flights of one of the contesting parties. Only the FAA, Federal Aviation Authority, has total control of inbound and outbound flights. Only they have the power to do that. But so what I'm saying is the long-established practice, that same Monroe Doctrine that they refer to, is still in force today, even though in a different way. Okay? Put on that the long-established assertion that the U.S. don't have friends, only interests. You see, understand what we're dealing with. Okay? And we should not be just comfortable with a foreign policy based on just pragmatism alone or idealism. Right? We got to add principle to that, which I think you just mentioned. Right? And if you were to do that, knowing the history, knowing the position of Venezuela, I mean, we do more than just tell the U.S. nicely to butt out. Okay? They mightn't take us on, but we should tell them that, this this imperialist type action, is not...
Well, in fairness, caller, you focus your comments on America, but Canada has done similarly. Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Paraguay, I mean, so many other countries in the Americas and elsewhere have done similarly. You've had countries in the Caribbean.
And again,
have done similarly.
Why do you think they do that? They do that, you know that they do that because back of their mind, they are looking at U.S. power. They're staring U.S. power straight in the face. Okay? And you're a brave person if you're going to take on U.S. power. Right?
So you think Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada is taking the position he's taking because of U.S. power?
Absolutely.
And if that is the case, why is Mexico
Canada's biggest trading partner?
Okay, if that is the case, why is Mexico not doing similarly?
Mexico? Mexico has its own battles with the U.S. You think Mexico right on the border with Mexico, with the U.S.
Yes, but I'm simply saying to you, you seem to be saying that the whole of the EU, Canada, all these countries in Latin America who have a position.
This is classic first world hegemony.
Okay.
Right? I honestly feel, as far as I know, I think they were talking to Russia and China as well, the U.S. Right? As for all we know, they already done carve out this thing and say, listen, you take Venezuela and Guyana, we're gonna take Ukraine and Syria. I mean, that's what I said. It's geopolitics, right?
All right. Well, let's not heap supposition on it, though we don't know. But I think that, as I said, I go back to where I started. I really feel that the leadership that is being provided at the regional level at this point under Dr. Harris is something to be applauded.
It might make us feel good, but we know in the prior analysis, the U.S. is going to do what the U.S. wants.
Okay, we'll leave it there. It's 20 minutes past the 9 o'clock. Let's go back to the phones. Good evening. You're on the mark.
Wait a little man.
Callers, when you get in, you make your point. Don't worry about the man. No, you make your point. Let's go back to the phones. Good evening. You're on the mark. Hello.
Good evening, Honorable Premier.
Yes, good evening to you, brother.
How are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you for having me back.
All right.
Yes.
Honorable Premier, we are living in serious times. Very, very serious times. And one of the things that has been troubling to me for a long time is that I find that our Caribbean leaders, and also those in Africa too, don't seem to want to really take time out to educate their people as to how to live. And when I say how to live, that is exactly what I mean. Because what I notice is that a lot of our people like to get what you call handout, rather than try as much as possible to fend for themselves and be as independent as you possibly can. I agree that we are all interdependent, but I'm sure you understand what I'm trying to say. Where, people must try as much as possible to look after themselves. Because what I have found is the more you depend on others, is the more they will seek to control you.
Mm-hmm.
And in this island here, Nevis, where I was born 60 years ago, I have noted over the years that a whole lot of emphasis is being placed on certain industries. And I think all the industries are important. But I think that certain industry, too much emphasis has been placed on, rather than teaching the people to learn to look after yourself as much as possible. You notice I'm qualifying that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because as I said, we are interdependent. But you spoke about the problem over in Venezuela.
Yes.
And I have been following a little bit for some months now. And I have talked to a broad section of people here in Nevis.
Mm-hmm.
And I am surprised that most of these people hardly saw this crisis developing. And one of the reasons for this is the news media that we are getting here. We are getting most of our news from the United States and the United Kingdom, which all of them is Europe. So we're getting our news from the Europeans, our international news, from the Europeans only. You never hear any Africa or other television or radio station bringing news here. It's mainly from Europe, which I call the United States a part of. And it's all propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
Because what these countries are doing, they don't care about what you call democracy or whatever. They care about what is their national interest.
Yes.
Apparently, I hear a lot of people mention the word democracy, you know. And sometimes I'm going to get on the wrong side because I seek to read and learn. And I know that there is a word that is called theocracy, which means the rule of God.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there is a word that is called democracy, which means the rule of man or Satan. However, the Europeans have somehow managed to craft this word in such a way and to tell us that ultimately what it means, let me put it in one word, freedom. But I know better. But let me go ahead now. And let's talk along the lines of so-called democracy, which is utter nonsense, because there is no democratic country in the world. You know, the problem in Venezuela has nothing to do with the form of government in Venezuela. As a matter of fact, I have not one time yet heard the U.S. accuse Venezuela openly of anything about anti-democracy. What I've been hearing them saying all along is that Venezuela is in an economic and humanitarian crisis. That is what I have been hearing. I have been following this for almost a year now. And let us look at why this crisis. Let us look at why this crisis. Now, for how many years the big oil companies in Europe, and when I say Europe, remember I'm talking about the United States as well, control the oil industry in Venezuela and reap the big profit from it. And only a little of it was going to the Venezuelan people. No, a man named Hugo Chavez raised up and saw what was happening and said, we can't take no more of this. You're just coming in and taking the bulk of the profit from our oil. And so Hugo Chavez nationalized the oil in Venezuela. You remember that, Premier Bandley?
Sure.
Okay. No, who tell he do that? Because Europe already said the world belongs to them. So, they start get antagonistic toward Chavez and Venezuela. And Chavez did not relent. And I'm sure all of us remember this story a little if we don't know it fully. And then they say, oh, we're not going to buy you oil and this and that. However, Chavez was smart, and to get some more of his oil sales, you know what Chavez did? Chavez farmer packed with us in CARICOM. You remember that, Premier Brantley? And agreed to give us the oil at a reasonable rate, and we pay when we can. You remember that, Premier Brantley? Okay. Which was very good for us. Man, that made them more angry. And so what they did, they started putting sanctions on Venezuela, and start as a result of they were the ones who was controlling the #1 resource in Venezuela. They were the ones who had the big profit and interest in Venezuela. So what they do, they start calling upon the European companies that do profit, whether in Venezuela or with Venezuela, to pull their interest out of Venezuela, seeking to create an economic crisis in the country. And that's what happened. It has nothing to do with Chavez or Maduro. They were the ones who caused the economic crisis in Venezuela. And as such, a humanitarian crisis, because once you don't have money, then you can't buy food and all those things. Things start getting hard, and then they're the same ones. Because remember, you know, the same one who create the problem is coming back in and saying that they're the one who's going to solve it, you know. So they come back and tell the Venezuelan people, oh, it's Chavez, oh no, Maduro, who is causing you hardship, when they were the ones who orchestrated the whole thing. You see? And so now, these companies pull their interests out of Venezuela, and they start going about and telling other countries, don't trade with Venezuela, don't buy its oil. And we know Venezuela rely heavily on its oil. In fact, it has the largest oil reserve in the world. The Venezuela economy is moved by its oil. And since they can't control it totally anymore, well, I shouldn't even say that, but since people like Chavez and Maduro is not allowing them just to have their full way, they decide they're going to punish the country. They're going to punish the country. And that's what they've been doing. You know how long they have, how many warships anchor off Grenada down there, and encouraging Colombia to harbor them and to give them airstrip to create an invasion in Venezuela. And I'm surprised that people in Nevis, even some of them who are going on radio and talking about them, don't know about these things, because they are so have us in the way they want us, that all we could see is the European way. What a tragedy. So, create the crisis and then come back and say, you're going to solve it. No, look at it now. Things get terrible in Venezuela. Maduro say, okay, we have our gold reserves in the Bank of England that we put there. It's our monies. Maduro asked for the money. You know what they said? You know what they said? We are going to freeze it, and instead, if anything at all, we will give a little bit over to your opponent. You're talking about a man who never even campaigned in an election or anything like that. They just want to take up their puppet and put him into office.
Well, let's be clear. He didn't campaign in a presidential election, but he is elected to the National Assembly.
I'm talking about the presidential election.
Right, good.
Because I'm talking in that context.
Yes.
Because they're putting him to be, they want to make him leader of the country.
Yes.
So I'm talking in context, very bluntly. So, how are you going to just take up a man? But of course we know, because they have done that how many times now? How many times now they have done that? Right there in Central America. in Africa, even in Grenada. Oh my God. So, you know, so now Maduro is asking for this Venezuela owned money, and England is saying, no, we're not going to give you your own monies. Rather, what we're going to do is give some of it to your opponent to fuel his campaign against you.
Let me ask you something.
Yes.
What is the lesson in that to you?
The lesson in that to me?
Yes.
Well, let me tell you, as for me, I try as much as possible to stand on my own 2 feet. But I recognize that there are certain powers in the world that is very powerful. And sometimes, regardless to what you do, you can't do much to stop them from doing what they want to do with
But
you.
here's my simple point, brother.
However,
The reason why England could hold on to Venezuela money right now,
yes.
because Venezuela put it in England.
Yes, but you see, Premier Brantley,
Yes.
remember, the whole economic system of the world was set up in Europe in such a way for centuries now. You see, and while I agree with you with that, and well, you're talking down my street too, you know, because that's why I started off with what I said. Let us try to be as much as possible self-reliant. We cannot go all the way, but let us try as much as possible, because soon as you have to depend on other people, that is what will happen. So me and you on the same page.
But that's the point I'm making. If you got $1.3 billion and you opt to put that in England to work for the England financial system, right?
Yes.
You know how powerful a financial system you could build with that kind of money being made available?
Yeah.
The problem that we have in our region is we continue to buy into the age-old stereotypes.
Exactly.
That if you have your money in Switzerland or in London, your money is somehow better off.
Yeah, yeah.
And we continue to, despite our education, despite all the development that we have had, continue to see things in that way. So when I heard about it, and I realized that the Bank of England is basically saying to Venezuela that we are going to hold on to your money, or we are going to only give money based on what Mr. Guaido says, not on what President Maduro says. It tells me that you basically push your hand down in the lion's throat, right?
Yeah.
And now the lion is closing him out and biting off your hand. But my view is that these are the times when we in this region need to take stock. And again, don't misinterpret me. I am not defending Maduro. I'm defending a principle. And I'm saying we need to take stock and we need to build institutions within our region. So that 100 years from now, when your great-grandson and my great-grandson are having a conversation, they will say, man, look at the banking system that we have in this part of the world. Look at the banking system that has been developed in Nevis or in Antigua or in Caracas for that matter. Just as you and I are now saying, look at the banking system that has been developed in Europe. These things are by design. And we feed into that. And feed into our own demise and underdevelopment. When we choose not to empower our own. You know, this is a little off topic, but still on topic in a way. I saw a debate raging on social media. St. Kitts announced the music festival. Okay?
Yeah.
And with all the acts that they have, they don't have any from Nevis. And Nevis people, oh, that's not fair, that's not right. You need some Nevis artists on the thing, right? And I step back, I look at it, and at first blush, it's an attractive argument. You say, well, it's one country, and the music festival should showcase people from both islands. But as I step back, you know what? It occurred to me. If all the local artists in Nevis were to put on a show in the complex in there and put it on for free, the people in Nevis will who would prefer to pay a boat and go St. Kitts and pay to go in to see a show in St. Kitts.
Very much so.
So it starts again with us. 'Cause if you're not going to support your own, what are you going to cost us somebody is not supporting your own?
That's the premise I start with you.
Well, so we come right back full circle to where you started.
Yeah.
Because that to me is the concern. We are not prepared to invest in our own, to support our own, and then we complain.
Yeah.
You know, I hear people talking about, oh, Chinese shop come here, this and that. But if you set up a place selling chicken and chips, and the Chinese man come next year and set up chicken and chips, a lot of Nevis people say, me not buy from you, no?
Yeah.
Me, he will never get rich off of me.
Premier Brantley,
We have to look at these things.
that is a matter of education. Yeah.
I-
But, you know, Premier Brantley, you said that the way the financial system is set up in the world is by design.
Of course.
And I was going to say that too. And I was going to also say that in a sense, these countries were kind of forced to. While I agree with what you say, look at it from another angle. Because the way it was set up, if you went against it, the movers and shakers would have bring down your country anyhow. You see? But I still think the argument that you made is the stronger one. Try as much as possible to look after yourself and stop be so dependent. But let us remember, it was set up that way, right? By design. And if these smaller countries had stood up and said, okay, if you know, Premier Brantley, remember some time ago, I said to you, you know, that me and you need to sit down and have a conversation. We have not done it yet.
But we need to soon.
Yeah, because I was going to say something to you, and I'm going to, me and you need to sit down in private and talk, you know, Premier Brantley, because you is the leader of the country, and you have traveled, and you have read, and you know some things. And some of these things, Premier Brantley, we going to have to say them kind of smart and more private to our people. Because you know, soon as we open our mouth, the people are out, some people out there listening. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Out there listening and saying, yes. So some of these conversations should be, rather than to public more, and more, rather than on the media, in some private town hall. And that's why I go back to again, we have to smarten up the people that when certain things are said, to keep your mouth closed, don't say it to certain people. But
Right.
they're going to carry back to the very people who want to hurt you.
All right, brother.
Yeah.
We'll leave it there. Thank you for your
Yeah, all right,
contribution. Okay, good. Let's go back to the phones. Good evening. Okay, let's try this caller. Caller, good evening. Okay, I'm sorry. 869-469-1616. 869-469-1700. Caller, you're on the mark. Hello?
Hello, good evening. I'm viewing something because some of them are not going to limit the time, man.
All right, you're in now, so give us your lyrics. Hello?
Yeah, hello.
You're on the air. Go ahead.
Me not on the air because somebody talks to me.
You listen to your radio, that's why.
Good evening. You try and what? And you're from Honorable Joseph. What I want to know is, even people able to a party and the church want to work. I think they're supposed to get to work, you know, because one federation will be. Not to say, because your mother are labor, your mother are PAM, your mother are unity, they can't do no work, because other people are coming out of the country and they get work. So we need to get work before we kill them too.
Yeah, but I agree with you, but work with who? You mean work with the government?
Work with the government because government says free share for all.
Yeah, well, I agree, but the government is not the only place for employment. There's employment throughout the
I
country.
understand, but some people want to work with the government.
Yeah, well,
And some people don't want to work with the government. But free share for all. Whether it's common labor, team unity, you're supposed to look up for how we're killing them too. Because we live in the country. Not all killers gone overseas and they're getting them when they work. And we here. Yes, have a good night. You take care.
okay, thank you. And you had some good lyrics. I like the way you put that. So you know, like the lyrics are sweet. So you bring some sweet lyrics. So I wish you all the best. But you're talking about work. The truth is, we have found that a lot of interest is being shown in working for the government. But I think the public needs to appreciate as well. The government cannot employ everybody. It simply cannot. It is impossible. And so, you know, I encourage people to look wider, to look at the private sector as well. Some say, well, government is more secure and all of that. But the truth of the matter is that we have to get our people to a point where we recognize that there are limitations in terms of what any government can do. Nowhere in the world can any government employ everybody who wants to be in the government. And so the private sector needs to be stimulated, and the private sector needs to be encouraged to grow, and our people need to be encouraged. I mean, we get bombarded all the time from people who are in a job in the private sector and are saying to you that they want to leave their job in the private sector to come and work for government. And I know some don't like it, but I always say to them, man, since you're in a job already, hold on to what you have and give somebody else who's not in a job an opportunity to get a job, rather than you leaving where you are to come into the public sector. So I understand what you're saying, Carl. I believe you say fair share for all. I agree in that. I agree to that, I'm sorry. But I feel that reality is that the government can never employ everyone who's seeking a job with the government. It is just impossible. And sometimes when I'm approached, I try to reach out sometimes to people in the private sector to say, you know, can you accommodate this person or that person? People are looking for work. And so my critical thing for me is that people are working. Not necessarily people are working in government, but people are working. Let's go back to the phones. We have about 16 or so minutes left. Good evening, you're on the mark.
Premier, how your night is going?
I am doing well, thank you. How are you?
Well, giving thanks for African redemption and our people ancestral history.
Yes.
Now, I hear a good conversation with you and this heretical virgin had about the economical stability when it comes to banking system and the way they're trying to utilize against the Venezuelan government. But one of the things I would like to really emphasize that America needs to take a step back and relax the mind and understand the world is not in their hands. The world is in the Creator's hands. So please stop interfering with human beings' livelihood, because they have sovereignty and they have the sovereign right to agitate where they live and how they live. Now, if you as a continent, as you claim, why is it that you want to overcome another one who is lesser than your population? Why? These are the things we need to really agitate towards these people when we meet them in high-level discussion. We cannot continue seeing the bigger countries and grabbing up the smaller countries and feel like the world must stand still with that because they name some kind of global powers or this G7 as they claim to say they carry. So, Mr. Premier, I would like to ask you now, in the consideration of how you all see that CARICOM had established a delegation to go to the United Nations, do you think in the concept that the United Nations will fully support the elected government that the people of Venezuela elect when he had the political campaign of presidency? I would like to hear your view on that, please.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, my brother. Let's just take these few calls. Good evening. You're on the mark.
Good night to Mr. and the Honorable Premier.
Yes, good evening, brother.
Yeah, yeah. My little input tonight that the heart of the Venezuela crisis that got up there, and I believe that the Prime Minister make a good move to go because he is chairman of CARICOM and represent us in whatever crisis Venezuela into, because that's a country for years now that the Venezuelan distinctive government aren't got a good relationship, and they help us a lot. And we got to console as members of the OECS and members of the members of the Caribbean or whatever. We got to console. But Mark, let me tell you that we in this country, some people bitter against this government for I don't see a reason why. And they're saying all kind of things. I asked the question earlier that why the Prime Minister never go to Dubai. Now, if he's the chairman of CARICOM and he leading the delegation to whatsoever they're doing in Venezuela, where he ain't supposed to go. So I don't know where you ask the question for.
Mm-hmm.
But I make you understand a lot of people saying all kind of thing, putting all kind of things on Facebook and all kind of thing on the phone and sending all kind of message about the Prime Minister. But anyway, that's just distraction. And I just want the good people of this federation to look high. Because this unity government serving the people well and no distraction. And I believe that we're ahead of them. That's why they see that they're coming with all kind of thing. We are ahead of them, Mark. Because never in history, I never see a government perform in this short time. So, the people, they will say what they got to do what they got to do, or say what they got to say, because they ain't part of what's going on now. When they was in part of what's going on and all kind of thing was happening, they come out and criticize and say nothing. But all of at once now, everything going bitter. But Mark, we as citizen division, we got to hold our head up high and walk with you all, because you all are doing a wonderful job. God bless.
All right. Thank you, brother. We have about 12 minutes left. Let's go back to the phones. Good evening. You're on the mark. Okay, we've lost that caller. Is there someone else holding? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to On the Mark. For those who have just tuned in, I am Mark Brantley, your host, and it's been a long trip for me, but I'm here, and we're trying to make it to 10 o'clock when the band strikes up and the show comes to an end. We're taking your calls at 869-469-1616, 869-469-1700. If you're tuned in, it must mean that you're listening to the Eastern Caribbean's only powerhouse, VON Radio, the voice of Nevis, www.vonradio.com or 860 on your AM dial. The phones have lit up again, so let's go back and take some more calls. Good evening, you're on the mark. Hello?
Hello, Mark, good evening, sir.
Good evening to you.
Mark, Venezuela help us, so we have to do our best to try and help Venezuela. Mark, I would like to thank all those persons who came out to our big fun day last Sunday, who supported us by participating in all of the events and also sponsors. And Mark, because of public demand, we will repeat it again on Sunday, and we have decided that we're going to keep 3 big, massive fun day leading up to our BPL League. So, begging all of these supporters and fans and the persons participating to come out on Sunday at 1 p.m. to the Hard Time Recreation Ground to support our fun day. We will have cricket, dominoes, tug-of-war, draft competition. We will have the beer drinking competition. We'll have the slides for children. And Mark, I'm begging you, please help us to get some lights at Hard Time so that the general public can use Hard Time, especially during the night time. Have a good evening, Mark.
All right, thank you very much for that. It's 10 minutes to the hour. Let's go back to the phones. Good evening, you're on the mark.
Mr. Brantley, good evening.
Good evening to you.
I want to ask a question. I don't know if you can educate me on it. Did Maduro did something and changed the Constitution recently?
I'm not sure if he changed the Constitution. I think there was an issue. It might have been. I am a little foggy in my own mind. I think there was an issue of him having a falling out with the Assembly. And I think he purported to dismiss them or something of that nature.
Yeah, because from what and I think I want to believe I'm 80% right. Because what I think happening right now is that I think the Senate, or whatever you call it, is actually like a lame duck.
Yes, and that's
whatever he did. And that is not democracy.
No, I mean, caller, I will be the first to agree that the events in Venezuela should be of concern. And I'm not just talking about recent events. The events that we've had there over the past 2 years or thereabouts.
You're right.
Has occupied a lot of time at CARICOM, at the OS, etc. And I agree. I have made it plain that I am no advocate for President Nicolas Maduro as an individual. I believe, however, that there's a broader principle that has to be looked at, and a question of the precedent that we are setting. Yes. Because remember, our actions today, even our actions to deal with a bad situation, might set a precedent that others will look to in the future. I give you an example, if I can bring it home locally. When I was leader of the opposition, Dr. Douglas as Prime Minister refused to give me a diplomatic passport.
Yes, I heard that.
Now that he is leader of the opposition, he demands that he be given one.
Yeah, right.
Some say, well, he's who set the precedent.
Yeah.
Others say we should depart from that precedent. But the point that I'm trying to make is that when precedents are set, sometimes down the road people rely on that very precedent.
Yeah.
Which some may now find objectionable. So all I'm saying is, whether it's Maduro or Guaido or whatever the gentleman's name is, or is it some third party, I believe in the position that the people of Venezuela should be encouraged and dialogue should be encouraged, that they resolve their problem in a peaceful way.
Well, I think what Spain did, I think Spain did the right thing. Spain, I think, gave him, I think it's 8 days.
Well, not just Spain, but others in the EU.
Yeah, to announce a date for general election.
Right.
Yeah.
But, Caller, the difficulty is that even if fresh elections were held, I believe that things have got to a point where it is so personal that if Maduro were to stand and were to win, you would still have those out there who say they're not prepared to recognize him. And therein lies the difficulty. Because then you
would have to respect the will of the Venezuelan
but that is the thing, because then you have the debate that enters now and say the election wasn't fair. The election was a sham. Because Venezuela just had elections, presidential elections. Maduro won, and the U.S. and others said it's a sham. We will not recognize him. Right? So it's not a situation where he took power by the bullet. He went to the polls. They, however, said the polls were a sham, and that is the basis. So how do we know that other polls which yield a result that some may not like will not equally...
He went to the polls after doing whatever he did to the Constitution.
I agree.
And that is why people were saying is that his election is, they're not recognizing it as legitimate.
Okay, I agree. But I'm simply saying, what would happen now if Maduro were to go to the polls and were to succeed? The reality is that those who have set their face against him as the individual will no doubt say the elections were not free and fair and were sham again, because they've made it clear they don't want Maduro. I'm saying, forget about Maduro. You know, we've had people from time to time who come and go. Think about the institutions in Venezuela, the country of Venezuela, and if we say that we're in favor of democracy, we cannot be calling on the military to solve the problem in Venezuela.
Yeah, that's true.
And we cannot be saying that we don't rule out an intervention, military intervention.
Yeah, well, I agree.
To solve the problem in Venezuela.
It should be solved by the people of Venezuela.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and what you should do is try and create a framework for those people to have a conversation. That is why I believe.
Yeah. What I think this whole problem started, I think it was it's 2017 when Maduro, when he lost the House.
Yes.
To the opposition.
Yes.
You know,
he responded badly to that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think he should have behaved in a way, just like how, even a lot of people in America don't like Trump. Now, the opposition is controlling the House, Nancy Pelosi. You have, Trump can't say that he go in and change anything now, and but this Venezuelan thing is very complicated.
It is complicated, but life is complicated, and democracy is complicated.
That's my little bit, Mr. Brand.
Yes, okay. Thank you. I feel that what we need to do is not exacerbate the complications, but recognizing that this is complicated, forget about the personalities involved. That's what I'm trying to get past, this Maduro or Guaido. Forget about the personalities involved and seek to see how we can fashion a solution that respects the Venezuelan people and ensures peace. But that to me is very important. Because if you have two sides baying at each other, and you ball out hoods and send them to fight, what is the result? That is the dangerous precedent that I'm concerned about. Let's go back to the phones. We have 5 minutes left. Good evening. You're on the mark. Hello? Okay, that caller isn't there. Callers, we have about 5 minutes. We can accommodate a few calls. 869-469-1616. 869-469-1700. Just to remind that I have my monthly press conference tomorrow, God willing, starting at 10 a.m. And that will be at the Pinnes Social Security Building at the Cabinet Conference Room there. We're inviting, of course, all the members of the media to come and to bring their questions, and as they usually do. And I view that as a very important occasion to report to the public as to the first month of the new year, in terms of what has happened thus far and what we hope to see happen in the weeks and months ahead. And so we certainly look forward to that. Let's take the phone calls once more. Good evening, you're on the mark. Hello? Caller, hello? Okay, that caller, I don't know what's going on, but that caller isn't getting through somehow. Again, caller, please try again. 869-469-1616. 869-469-1700. Those are the numbers to call. Please, when you're calling, listen to your phone. A lot of people listen to the radio or the computer where there's a delay. So if you listen to your phone, you'll hear me clearly when I say, hello, you're on the mark.
Good evening, Mr. Mark Batley.
Good evening to you.
I've been listening to the word, using the word democracy. The democracy. You keep saying dialogue. Democracy. Dialogue, Mr. Mark Batley. Where's my democracy? I'm Curtis Cook. Where's my democracy? Where's my dialogue? I'm asking the question. What is the meaning of democracy? What is the meaning of dialogue? These are the questions I'm asking, Mr. Mark Batley.
Okay. Well,
you were saying, I'm not finished, Mr. Mark.
Yes.
You keep using the word democracy.
I'm just saying, caller, you've called at the very last minute, so I'm asking you to speed up.
Oh, okay. I'm just saying, I'm a listener. I sorry to call the last minute because I would like to get into some little talk with you, but because of the last minute, because the word democracy, dialogue, Curtis Cook ID was pulled with immediate effect. No dialogue, no democracy. You have a good night.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. I can't speak to the specifics of any matter involving you, and perhaps we have been on the air for 2 hours. As I said, it's unfortunate you called at the last minute, but perhaps you can pick this up next week. I certainly would like you to tell me what it is you're concerned about. Democracy, however, clearly we were talking about democracy as it's understood in its true form, and dialogue in the context of saying that dialogue is preferable to confrontation. And in Venezuela, we need the parties to speak to each other. And Dr. Timothy Harris is leader of CARICOM at the moment. And CARICOM can, I believe, be the force to negotiate and the force to act as a mediator to allow this to happen. An honest broker, and I think we have the capacity within our region to solve our region's problems. That's our show for this evening. This show is rebroadcast tomorrow at 1 p.m. And thank you for joining me. I'm happy that you helped me through the 2 hours. It's been difficult. I'll get some rest now. Thank you. Good night, and God bless you.